Welcome back to our CEO.CA viewers. My name is Amrit Gill and we're in Toronto, Canada for PDAC, the world's premier mineral exploration and mining convention. Joining me now is Theo Yamamoto with Ernst & Young, the America's and Canada's metals and mining leader. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Happy to be here. How are you finding the convention so far?
I think that last year when it was moved to the spring, and it was after COVID, we had the sense that, yeah, maybe the numbers were just because we were in the spring and after COVID, but this year brought it back to the winter and it's really packed. So it's great to see so many people coming from all around the world and great to see enthusiasm. I can see lots of smiling. It's always an indication that the sector is in the right spot. Even if we have headwinds of like economic downturns coming up, it looks like the sector is poised to actually, respond to demand from other industries.
Yeah, lots of engagement and lots of people looking for information and insight, and that's why we've brought you here. So I'm going to deep dive right into it.
Okay.
ESG and mining, how can we reconcile some of the past problems and address industry stigma?
So this is an interesting question because in our top 10 risks that we publish every year at EY, we actually separated the ESG from things like climate change or social license to operate. The reason is that typically some of the issues we find in mining that created trouble in the past are being resolved differently. So we talk ESG, but really if you want to break it down, we had issues with communities, for example, so that's more on the S side. We had issues with tailings up to recently, that's more on the E side. We have issues with water management. We have issues with governance, how government get paid and corruption issues. So this is what the transparency of the ESG reporting is bringing. It's just, instead of leaving it to the will of each mining company or each mining participant, it's basically becoming a pan-sector requirement so that everybody plays on the same game. So that's really what's positive. So the reconciliation of it, to me, it's more of okay, let's get more particular and more prepared on how we're responding to societal needs, not only by producing the minerals, but also by making sure that we have the communities, by making sure the governments are fully transparent and the mining companies are fully transparent, making sure we have good health and safety records. And if you think about ESG, I usually take people back to the responsible gold mining principle, for example, or the mining principle from the ICMM. Because there are just principles of how mining should operate, whether we call it ESG or not. And those principles are fully understood by mining companies nowadays. Lots of signatories of those principles. So we should see a massive difference in not only how mining approaches society, but also how society views mining.
Well, if I look all around us, we're seeing a lot of young faces just joining one of the student mixers that it's about to happen. From your experience, what do you think needs to be done to draw a little bit more of attention and youthful participation in this industry?
Yeah, so I was on a vlog not long ago talking about young people, but the person doing it was really down to kids that are like 8 years old. How do we get younger kids to do it? And the way I look at it is that it's a generational sector. Okay, if when at EY we talk about diversity and inclusion, we also talk about people that are retired or people that are about to retire. So the sector needs to have enough space for true diversity and inclusion, from younger people that enter the workforce with minimal experience to people with more experience that we actually need to keep working in the sector because they have so much experience. So there's a class between what I call it's like the gurus and the wizards. So the wizards are the younger ones that are coming with new ideas and saying, how come you didn't try this before, whatever. And then the gurus are the ones that actually believe they have cracked the code, but actually they cracked some code, not all of it. So that symbiosis between the two groups is actually how mining can move forward. We cannot, like you were saying in the beginning, there were errors in the past. There were also good things in the past, like, you know, using more equipment rather than human labor to do mining and stuff like that. So we cannot forget about those acquired progress that we've seen in the sector. So that's what the gurus are here for. And then the wizards are here to say, yeah, well, how about blockchain? How about autonomous mining? How about making sure that we're fully diverse and inclusive? And things like that can only make things better if we put it together.
And it's that diversity of thought that can help us create adaptive, fluid strategies that are responsive to ever-changing situations globally.
Yeah.
So when we look at things through a geopolitical lens, what risks are there with certain supply chains being in specific regions of the world?
So that's a very good point, because a mining operations, you know, from the mine itself to the mill, actually has two aspects. There's a supply chain that are inbound, and there's the outbound supply chain. The outbound supply chain is what we like to talk about the most, because everybody's waiting for the minerals, right? And in the outbound supply chain view, when we talked about geopolitical risk in the top 10 risks that we published, we were thinking about the change of trade flows. One of them was due to COVID, because during COVID, most countries realized that they were dependent too much on outside trade flows. So they tried to build their own. So that was one of the reasons. The second reason on geopolitical risk on trade flows is that with the war in Ukraine, we anticipated that, okay, some companies may not be able to produce from Russia and export, and we've seen it. You know, one of our Canadian mining companies was the first one to actually have to exit Russia, a gold mining producer. So, and then we also foresee some intensifying tensions between the powerhouses. So, like between the United States and some other countries in Asia that are bigger producers of the metals. And last but not least, there's some local geopolitical plays that have massive repercussions. So think about Chile. When Chile voted a younger president and they tried to change the royalty rules, that was a bigger impact on copper production. And then when Peru also voted a left-leaning president, that was another impact on copper production. And then it changed the play of copper. So that's only for consuming the minerals. But what we saw with our clients during basically the past 18 to 24 months is actually getting the inputs is also hard. So if you're thinking about getting explosive, for example, from blasting and you know, starting the exploitation of the gold or the copper or the zinc, whatever, you may not actually have it. So we had a lot of inbound supply chain issues, and many mining companies actually had to find new sources to get the supplies into their mine sites to operate it. So there's a two side to the game in terms of the geopolitical risk to the supply chain. And, you know, the way we look at it at EY is that we believe that at the end of the day, there's new trade flows that get created. If you think about IRA in the United States, the Inflation Reduction Act, and how it's basically fostering certain supply chains, it means that we're going to have some new supply chains. If you think about the offtake agreements between some of the OEM companies and the critical minerals producers, these are new plays to actually offset the risk to the supply chain. So that's another one.
Well, I want to bring it back to Canada.
Yes.
How can the industry here stay competitive despite the unequal playing field globally when it comes to upholding those environmental standards and, you know, winning at the same time?
Yes. So there is an interesting aspect in your questions. Actually, we are very competitive as a country. We already have the best financial center nexus, I'll call it, in the world with Toronto. We do most of the mining deals in the world. We have the most respected mining companies in the world. And I don't believe that we have initial competitive in Canada, because the Canadian mining companies will operate here the same way they'll operate elsewhere. So there's a standard of operating by a mining company that is independent of where they operate. Now, typically, mining companies that are listed have a governance system that makes them accountable and responsible no matter where they operate. The way to look at your question that I'm guessing some of your audience will be, trying to get an answer to, is really around the permitting and whether or not we are an attractive jurisdiction to do business. And on that front, I would first say that there's a premium in the market for operating in Canada, which is why there's a lot of interest in having operation in Canada by foreign mining companies, because everybody knows that we are stringent enough, but we're also the reference. That's the first one. On the second side, every province and even the federal government is making efforts to keep updating the mining regulation so that we maintain the competitiveness. Now, there's a lot of reporting going on. We even published one alongside the Association of Mining Exploration in BC yesterday on competitiveness and how much money is being invested in every province for just new mines or new exploration sites. So I would say that in the end, Canada doesn't have to worry really about being competitive because there's a premium for being here. And every so often, we're getting updates to our mining acts by province. In fact, Ontario is looking into doing the update to the mining act. They're asking for comment. And I think that this is what we need to do. We don't need to default to the lowest common denominator of environmental standards, but we need Canadian mining companies to operate at the Canadian mining standards even when they're elsewhere.
Well, thank you for sharing your thoughts on how to exercise good corporate citizenship and having that nuanced lens. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with our community at CEO.CA?
I actually believe that the biggest challenge we have as society, not really as a sector, as society, is the education around where we're getting things. Most people don't realize that there will not be energy transition without metals and minerals. There is none. So we need more metals and minerals, but we need the metals and minerals to come out cleaner than they used to be. And our job as mining executives and mining practitioners is to continue educating everybody, neighbors, friends, family, around the value chain of how they get things. So that's what I was saying.
Well, we appreciate the information and insight today. We hope you enjoy the rest of the convention, Theo. Thank you.
Thank you very much.